Today we are here to break down the NFC Championship between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings. So, just getting right to it, finishing the year, the Eagles were seventh in total offense after losing Wentz, of course. They had been averaging 365.8 yards a game. They finished third in rushing with 132.2 a game, and they were thirds in yard per carry at 4.5 a pop. 13th in passing offense at 233.6 yards a game, and they were 16th in sacks allowed, allowing 36. So they were also 8th on third down offense, converting 42% of the time. They were 4th in total defense at 306.5 yards allowed a game. First rushing defense in the league at 79.2 yards allowed a game, and tied for 6th in yard per carry allowed at 3.8. However, they were 17th in passing defense, allowing 227 yards a game, and they were tied for 15th in sacks at 38. And I know that might shock a few people, but their defense is not necessarily always sack. It's a lot of constant pressure around the quarterback. So there's that. They were tied for 18th in passing touchdowns allowed with 24, and they allowed a 79.5 quarterback rating. Now, injury-wise, this team had Dannell Ellerbe. He's questionable, and he's the only one questionable. He's a linebacker, of course. And then you have Camu Grieger-Hill, I think is how you say that. And he's going to be in with an ankle, and then Sidney Jones, the corner, also has a hamstring problem, but he should be in, but those two were dinged up as well. And then going over to the Minnesota side of things, 11th in total offense at 356.9 yards a game. 7th in rushing offense at 122.3 yards a game. But like I've been saying for a good chunk of this year, they have good total numbers at the end of these regular season games. But a concern for me is the fact that the yards per carry is not as high as you would like that to be, because they're tied for 22nd at 3.9. They're 11th in passing offense, though, at 234.6 yards a game, and they are tied for 7th in sacks allowed at 27, and they are third in third down offense, converting 44% of the time. Now, Minnesota is the first in total defense, allowing only 275.9 yards a game. Second in rushing defense compared to Philly's first-ranked rushing defense at 83.6 yards allowed, and they are fifth in yards per carry allowed at 3.7, and that's a 0.1 difference. Pretty much a wash there in terms of the rushing attacks. And then passing defense is at 192.4 yards allowed a game, and that's good for second in the league. They are tied for 27th when it comes to, not 27th, 17th when it comes to the sacks at 37. And they're first in touchdown passes allowed at only 13, and they're third in quarterback rating at 73 flat. So, and then obviously first down defense, it's like 25.2%, like almost, it's like historically high for this defense. And then injury report, this is the one that I think everyone needs to be concerned about in Adam Thielen, because he's questionable. I highly doubt he doesn't play, but having him at 100% is so vital, and not having him there would be a little bit of a heartbreaker, knowing the fact that the Phillies' pass defense, not the best when it comes to, they'll actually give you plays. Like in man-to-man coverage, they're actually not as great as one would think. So what they really get you with is basically turnovers. And not having Thielen to get open on those routes would really suck. But continuing on, Shamar Stephen, we saw what happened to him last week. He's going to be out with a knee and ankle. Sendejo is in a concussion protocol. He's questionable, but from how everything looks, I'm imagining he's going to be a go. So then you have Mackenzie Alexander, the nickel corner, also questionable with a rib and illness. That's a little concerning. I'll go over that one later. Anthony Harris with a knee. He's in. Pat Elflein's shoulder. And Michael Floyd wasn't listed as questionable or doubtful or any of that. He has an illness, and he's not with any kind of status on him. So I'm assuming he's going to be in, but he also didn't practice all week, so that's a little interesting. Especially since Thielen could be a problem with the lower back. And now just getting more in depth here. To me, Keenum needs to play a very clean game. We cannot have turnovers or any of that. None of those shenanigans. We can't have what he did last week with the just popping it up like, oh, I'll just chuck that like that, and then picked off Marcus Williams. And the other thing I want to kind of tell you guys is even if it is ineffective, you must run the ball just to keep them honest. So, like I said, with our receivers, Thielen, Diggs can have a few plays out there. So if you can just run the ball enough to make them think that you're gonna run, you can hit him with the play action pass, and you might get it up over the top. So I would think even if it's not the most effective running game in the world, you need to stick with it just to keep him honest, so you can eventually hit him with that strike. And in a game like this, I feel like if you can hit on that, that could be the difference in the game. And one thing I do want to say is McKinnon to me is going to be a big factor in this game again. I know I say this a lot with McKinnon, and rarely does it ever happen. But McKinnon to me is a big factor again just because of his speed and his game-breaking element. Because you can occasionally get the edge on this defense. Occasionally, not often, but occasionally you can. So if you have a chance at it, you need to take it. Because just how they rush the passer, essentially, they're taught to play the rush on the quarterback at the same time as playing the run. And that kind of leaves that C gap. There's a lane there. So if you can kind of get it laterally moving, especially in a game where you're talking about Fletcher Cox in the middle with Benny Logan and Beau Allen and all those guys, they rotate very well on this line. So on the interior, it's going to be hard to just run vertical up the field. And it's really hard to run out wide on them just because that wide nine. That's why I'm saying, like, if you have that chance to hit that edge, you need to take that edge because that could be one of the few plays that really takes it, basically. This is going to be a very grinded out game, and having a guy like that can possibly break a run is immense. So we need to have McKinnon to hopefully play a role here, and like I was talking about before, the line to me needs to try to pretty much the line needs to play the best game that they've played all year. Now that's kind of a tough order here, especially in the NFC Championship game when you're talking like this is possibly the best defensive line in the league, like just from top to bottom of how much depth is there, and you're missing your left guard. So you're working with a backup tackle, and your normal right tackle is going to be playing left guard because your normal left guard's hurt, and you need your best 5 on the field. So, although it still makes more sense to me to put Berger at left guard and put Remmers at right guard, but I doubt we'll see a change. So, there is that. And another thing I will say, just to try to get any kind of running game on this defense, we may see the Aviant Collins jumbo package again with the 2 tight end sets with Morgan and Rudolph. So that wouldn't shock me to see that. They seem to be successful when they run out of this, and I believe they actually were in that set last week when they had the pitch to McKinnon out on the first drive. So it's not like this is something that would be new. This is something I kind of expect to happen a few times in the game. And that being said, we need to kind of stay ahead of the chains. That's kind of why I'm really harping on this running game, because you need to keep them, obviously you need to keep Philly honest, but you also need to keep it third and manageable for Case Keenum, as we've seen, like it's just 3rd and 6 and longer, we rarely get those. So keeping it 3rd and 5 and shorter, and we're golden. We are golden at that point. And then this goes into the defensive side, which is not as stressful, but can be stressful. And so one important matchup I will say, because I don't expect this matchup all too often, but just because of how much moving around this Philly offensive line does, they do a lot of pulling and a lot of traps and zone kind of runs. So Linval Joseph versus Jason Kelsey, whenever you get that matchup, just one-on-one, whoever wins those consistently may end up winning this game just because of how important this running game is going to be to both teams. So that's a lot more important than people probably realize. And I know that's not something that everyone's going to really talk about in the media. It's like, oh, it's a defensive tackle and a center. Fun. I know it's not the sexiest thing to talk about, but it's one of the most important things that we need to talk about. So Linval Joseph needs to win those in order for Minnesota to win this game. And I feel like you need to stack the box pretty much entirely with everyone you have, which is the 9-man box. Just dare Foles to beat you because we play a lot tighter than what Atlanta does. Because that's more of a scheme thing with Atlanta, not necessarily a talent thing. Just from how they like to play cover three, and so just by virtue, you have a lot of zone concepts, and you can usually find a few holes there in the middle. So, and RPO offense that they were running was really successful against that. But Minnesota, they like to play more man to man. So, and you have Xavier Rhodes on Alshon Jeffrey, and obviously Trey Waynes is probably going to be on Torrey Smith most of the game. And the one matchup that I feel is going to be a real problem for us, or has potential to be, well, I guess the two are Zach Ertz and Nelson Aguilar, because obviously Mackenzie Alexander being on the injury report with both a rib and an illness. That's not good, especially when you have Terrence Newman, even though it's amazing that he's playing at the age of 39, and not only playing at the age of 39, but playing cornerback. So I get that that's kind of an anomaly, but having him against Nelson Aguilar in the slot is a major disadvantage for us. And Ertz can line up with a lot of people, and generally you would think a safety like Harrison Smith or Sendejo, but I might want to almost bracket Aguilar with one of those two and possibly leave Ertz. You might have to sacrifice a little bit to Ertz just because you don't want to get beaten by Aguilar deep, because once again, this is going to be a game where there's not going to be much scoring going on, and you cannot let that happen. So, going on with this, turnovers can kill you. This goes for both sides. To me, a turnover can be death. It really could be. Like, one turnover, one pick six, and it's over for either team, I feel. And that could be a problem for Philly, as Ajayi has had fumble problems, as had Nick Foles. And Nick Foles hasn't faced a secondary like this, well, or a complete defense like what Minnesota has. So we could see some things start to come unravel a little bit for Nick Foles if we start getting pressure, especially with Griffin being on Vitae. And for the most part, this line is actually playing fantastic, but it's Vitae to me that's the weak link. So I would think a lot with Tom Johnson and Everson Griffin, maybe some Anthony Barr. Overload that side when you get the third and long, and just try to pretty much put as much pressure on Hal Vitae. Hal Vitae. I'm going to go with Hal. So, yeah, but if you put as much pressure on him as possible, I would think there will be a few times where he'll break down. So I'm kind of hoping that's going to happen. And Brandon Brooks against Tom Johnson is an interesting matchup, because if they like to pull a lot, because they have a lot of great athletes on this offensive line. So you never have pretty much the man on man that you normally see. You have a lot of sweeps, a lot of traps, a lot of zone kind of reads, and well, not zone reads, but kind of zone runs, the inside and the outside zones. Tom Johnson, he can't necessarily line up 1-for-1 against Brandon Brooks, but if we're talking about just being an athlete in space, he can beat him to a spot. So that's going to be an interesting one to match up on, because they do like to run that outside zone on his side. So Tom Johnson also going to be very key in this game, just to kind of blow that up, hopefully. And I kind of have faith in him to do that, as he's been doing it most, if not all of the season. And this game is going to be, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be ugly, 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 ugly. It's going to be a defensive struggle. It's going to be your classic kind of almost 1990s, 1980s kind of game, where it's like you got to read your keys and you got to just block well, and even if it's going to be a lot of that. So we're going to be taken out of this high flying passing era for a bit for this game, and I do think we need to watch for the RPO offense though, because that's how they kind of got things going last week with Nick Foles. And if you can force Nick Foles into these situations where mainly it's third and long-ish at least, and he has to throw it down the field, I feel confident in our chances to not only stop them but to actually get a turnover. And I'm assuming they probably feel a lot of the same way against Case Keenum, just because if you can get the pressure on him, he's liable to throw one up to you, possibly two or three. So I imagine that's kind of a shared feeling. But overall, I feel like since we do have the better defense, and although not by a million miles, I do think we do have the better skill players on offense. Because I know they have Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, and Nelson Aguilar. But I feel like Nolan Zach Ertz, I do feel like having two possible top 10, top 15 receivers in both Diggs and Thielen is very key in that. And obviously, if Thielen can't go, then they get an edge there entirely. So, out of all this, I'm going to take Minnesota in this game, even though a lot of the Viking stuff in me is saying you need to hold back. You're predicting a Vikings Super Bowl. Part of me is thinking we really should win this game. I'm going to say 13-9. Minnesota wins, and like I said, this thing is going to be ugly, and it's going to be kind of one of those flashback games. And I would like to know what everyone else's opinions are on this. And till after the game, I bid you adieu.